Hi, this is Robin, and this video is about caregiver stories. I've written a couple of articles and I've written the book 12 Tiny Wellbeing Tips for Caregivers. And in doing that, I've been privileged to hear other people's stories about what it's like to be a caregiver. With that said, it's been so insightful for myself, and I thought I'd share a few without naming any names or any big details, so that you could understand a little bit more about what it's like to be a caregiver. So, first story is, when we were first along for this ride, when Dave was first diagnosed, a lady reached out to me who had read one of my articles. She started out the conversation in tears, pretty much. She was talking about her husband and about the loss that she was experiencing, how he was showing up, the symptoms that were showing up, and how he was in the midst of getting a diagnosis, which they were pretty sure was FTD. Again, she cried the whole time. But then it got to the really hard part, and that was that she had two grown children who were convinced that the dad was fine and that it clearly was the mom. This happens a lot in FTD. Usually the caregiver is the one that talks about what they see. And usually when FTD enters, all sorts of bizarre things show up that make you question, as a caregiver, your own sanity. So often the caregiver will show up a bit insane, just to be clear. And this lady obviously did that. So her grown children were pretty much so threatening to sue her and grab custody of the dad. I just felt so bad for her because she was falling apart emotionally. Her life was falling apart around her. And her two grown children were totally against her. I'll never forget it. Another story. There was a gentleman we met, and he was pretty much, 99% sure that his wife had FTD. She and he had been married for a while. They had teenagers, and she had a fairly good job. She was well thought of in the community, and it was really a prestigious job. She was managing to hang on to it by a thread, and her behavior was totally bizarre, at least from his viewpoint, what he saw. The kids didn't know I see it. They would hear the dad talk about it, which made it look like he was disrupting their normal, happy family life. And the kids pretty much so blamed him because it looked kind of like marital problems were going on. He was pretty much so losing his family. You could hear it in his voice. His wife actually was asking for a divorce. She was becoming promiscuous. She would do weird things like lick her plate when she was done eating at the restaurant. And again, very bizarre behavior compared to what she was like before. The husband was falling apart emotionally. He was losing his job, so to speak. And as he was telling us his story, he burst into tears 2 or 3 times. You could just so hear how unfortunate and how sad and frustrating this all was for him. So that's number 2 story. Number 3 story. There was a lady that I met whose husband had FTD. She met me. She kind of snuck out of the house because he was he was very jealous and very controlling. She snuck out of the house and met me and told me that he had guns in the house. And I looked at her and I said, "That's not good." She goes, "I know." And we talked about some sort of a plan to maybe help her find a way to get him help. Because he was in denial, did not want to admit that he had FTD, and she was pretty sure that's what she was seeing. I guess the diagnosis wasn't quite made. but his behavior, after she explained it, sounded very much like FTD symptoms. So, but she was afraid. I felt really bad for her. Another woman who I met, her husband was diagnosed with FTD, and the parents, though, of the husband, I guess it was a wealthy family that she married into. The parents of the husband didn't want to admit that there was anything wrong and blamed her and said she was the problem. She just wanted his money, and they encouraged the husband to get out of the relationship. So he was asking her for a divorce, all the while being promiscuous and making really bad choices. She came to me, we were talking, and she cried the whole time. Her life was falling apart. She had no money. The parents took control of everything. It was crazy. Again, she was blamed. Another person with FTD who showed up in a way that he couldn't talk. He honestly, his voice, his vocabulary did not match up with what he was thinking in his head. So evidently FTD hit him in that part of the brain that affects your speech. And you couldn't understand a thing, honestly, that he said. The wife was constantly in between he and other people trying to interpret for the other people. He would get angry all the time because she didn't hear him right, or other people should understand what he's saying. I felt so bad for her. She was under such stress. Another gentleman who had FTD showed up. He couldn't walk, so he would use a walker or a cane. It looked like Parkinson's disease, but it was all, in actuality, it was FTD. Both of those gentlemen could balance the checkbook. They were great with that. The guy who couldn't talk drove everywhere. He pretty much so took control of all the decisions in the family, but he couldn't talk. It's so bizarre. So I guess the reason I'm sharing these stories is because when FTD enters a home, it honestly, you don't know, not two people are alike. The symptoms are across the board, crazy and bizarre. Bizarre things show up. Some people spend money like crazy. Some people eat like they have no bottom, like they just continue to fill their body. Some people don't eat at all because their body doesn't tell them they're hungry. It's just bizarre. Some people can't walk, some people can't talk, depending on where it hits you in your brain. The caregivers are the ones that see it. They're the ones that are going, what is going on? They're the ones that have the emotional connection to the past. Often FTD people don't always get all that. It's all discombobulated in their head. They may not have memory issues, but it may not make sense in their progression or whatever. My point is that the caregivers often see it all, often experience it all, and the people from the outside have no clue usually. So these caregivers are falling apart. The other thing is that our country, I think, is a bit concerned because all the baby boomers are entering into that senior phase of life, and we're all going to need caregivers down the road. And the government knows the way things are going, there aren't going to be enough. So the caregivers that we have, I guess my point with this video is saying, take care of the caregivers that you know. Love them. Call them up. Get them to talk to you. Listen to them. You know, take them a flower or a meal. Go give them a break. Help them to be the best they can be so that they can be a caregiver. It'd be one less person that's going to be out there in the world without one, right? I don't know if I'm saying this right, but regardless, I hope this helps create a little bit of insight into what it's like to be a caregiver. So, this is the end of this video, and until we meet again, I hope life treats you well. And if it gets a bit tough, just remember to keep your chin up, Buttercup. All right, that's it for tonight. Until we meet again, over and out.